There we go. Good morning, all, or afternoon, I suppose, for the East Coast. My name is Daniel York, and I'm here at GSA. But today I'm serving in the capacity of the government chair of the ACT-IAC IT Modernization and Management Community of Interest, COI. With that, let's go to the next slide. A little bit about our COI as we get kicked off. You got myself here as well as Rob as our vice chair, Varsha and Shaq on the industry side. We do have some new members of our leadership team. David and Cum have recently joined, so you may see them online as well. And of course, Melvin and Margie continue support in the executive advisory capacity. And then we'll go ahead and get kicked off. And I have the great pleasure of introducing someone who probably does not need much of an introduction, but Melvin Brown will be moderating our session here around FinOps and the federal space. Melvin, of course, has a long history within the federal government, but also outside, serving most recently as the CIO of OPM, but many other roles throughout several agencies. And so with that, Melvin, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Dan. Good afternoon, everybody. I am excited about this topic, something that I have been passionate about both for my time in and out of government. And so to kind of set the stage, though, I do want to mention that most recently, the FinOps Foundation published its sixth annual State of FinOps survey, which is sort of a global snapshot of the FinOps community and what's going on in the FinOps space. FinOps has accelerated into a proactive technology-wide discipline where AI dominates forward-looking agendas. The scope has definitely expanded from beyond cloud, and practitioners with executive alignment show two, almost four times more influence over technology selection decisions. So what we've learned is that FinOps is no longer just expanding past the spend. It's shaping future technology decisions before commitments are made. And to align with the FinOps Foundation has updated its mission from advancing the people who manage the value of cloud to advancing the people who manage the value of technology. And so, with that, I am joined today by what I would consider to be three people who are at the forefront of this. Megan Sikora, who's the senior account manager at IBM. She was formerly GSA. Ron Williams, who's the director of cloud acquisition and infrastructure operations at GSA. And my good friend, Rob Martin, who is the FinOps fellow and FinOps Foundation practitioner. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. So glad to have you. So glad to have this talk with you, and so glad to be a part of this discussion. And so I want to set the stage for a moment and talk a little about FinOps as an enabler of missions. Federal agencies are under sustained budget pressures while cloud adoption and AI investments continue to accelerate. And so, from your perspective, how has the conversation around IT cost management evolved over the past 2 to 3 years? And why is FinOps now starting to resonate in ways that, maybe earlier it didn't? And so, Megan, I'm going to come to you first and just get your thoughts and hear from you.
Sure thing. Yeah. So thank you for the introduction, Melvin, and thank you for having me on this panel. So I think what we've seen over the past few years is that obviously every year there's budget crunch. That's nothing new, right? I used to manage a budget myself, and every year it felt like we were taking a 15-20% cut across the board. I think why we're seeing it a little bit more today and why FinOps is becoming a big discussion is if you've been in the federal government for a while, you remember like the whole cloud first, and then it was cloud smart, and then it's cloud this, cloud that. Now it's AI this, AI that. So I guess we can just call it AI smart. We'll jump ahead. So what's happened is a lot of folks, especially during COVID, right, shifted to cloud and probably did it quicker than they expected. And so some of those costs weren't necessarily forecasted appropriately. And so now people are kind of questioning like, hey, did we make the right move? Cloud is too expensive. They're kind of viewing it a little bit differently. And I think this is why we're seeing FinOps really come in, because it's questioning like, what was the value of moving to this? People weren't necessarily measuring it the appropriate way. And so the value is there. And I think FinOps can really, put that into practice. in addition to that, it really helps to put some guardrails around things. So as we see AI start coming in, people are like, hey, AI is great, but how do we, learning from our past, how do we control those costs? And I think that's where FinOps practices really come into play. You can understand the costs, you can, optimize when you start seeing things. And then obviously like putting those guardrails in place and having governance in place is going to be key to making sure that we don't like relive some of the things that we've seen in the past.
Ron, same question. What are you seeing?
Great question. It's good to be here with everyone as well. One thing that I'm seeing in the cloud space that agencies are really being enabled by is that the technologies have generally matured, and so rather than looking at new and novel technologies and seeing this as an initial investment or potentially an experimental investment, as we maybe did 10 years ago, we now have agencies that are seeing this as an opportunity, seeing this time as an opportunity to compare pricing and cost among the cloud service providers that are, at this point, very mature in their offerings, and selecting using FinOps approach to compare where they're getting the best value for their money, and that also includes looking and seeing, does it make sense to use a single vendor, whether a cloud provider or cloud services only, or maybe a hybrid approach with some of the on-prem footprint that still exists in the federal space, or co-location with other companies, depending on the workload. So I think what we're seeing is agencies taking a closer look at the costs, the expenditures, seeing what other agencies are paying for the same services, and being able to make better decisions for the cloud and IT investments that they have.
So, Rob, you've got an interesting view. You've had a chance to see it, almost from its infancy stages, specifically as we work together on the federal special interest group and looking at the public sector and how that's been expanding. So, what's your take? Because you've been around it a while now.
Yeah, thanks for calling me the old guy. It has been an interesting run, and I agree with everything that Megan and Ron just said. I think the cloud was, FinOps was designed to be a toolkit of capabilities, things that you could do to understand and then optimize the use of your cloud, primarily when cloud was new. Now that I think companies, agencies are more comfortable working with that, they're starting to ask those questions more broadly across the technology landscape. That was one of the things that came off in the state of FinOps data was that FinOps teams are really expanding their view of what they're looking at, to not just look at the cloud bill, but actually to look at the SaaS spending, what SaaS products are we doing and what rationalization should we do there, to look at data center infrastructure and licenses that we're using. And I think there's, in the FinOps data, we're seeing a lot of companies, Ticketmaster coined the term for me, happily hybrid, right? They're not looking to run all their stuff out of the data center into the cloud. They're not looking to repatriate everything back into a data center. They're recognizing that their technology landscape is going to be a mix of things, and they're going to have to make good decisions across all those different things, decide where they're going to invest. And I think AI, I would blame AI. Do we have the AI assistant on? We do. I'll thank AI for doing for like sort of highlighting the way that you have to think about investments across the data center. You have AI investments running in your data center. You have to think about them in terms of the SaaS products you buy. You have to think about the licenses you own. You have to think about the AI SKUs that are popping up in every single license. If you look at your Microsoft bill or your Oracle bill, you'll probably see some things in there. So it's an environment that is both maturing and getting more complex as more and more and more of the things that we buy get more cloud-like, consumption-based, really granular data, and that's going to be the continuing challenge going forward.
So, Ron, I want to tee this up to you. Just what misconceptions do agencies still have about FinOps? Particularly speaking around, is this just a finance problem, or is this just a cloud building exercise? What are you seeing as somebody who's still in government, boots on the ground?
Yeah, I'll tee off of also Rob's last comment about licensing, right? And how we're seeing AI coming into every offering, every new contract or estimate. There's an add-on for AI services, and so the FinOps we really need to pay attention using these FinOps strategies um, to make sure we're getting the value out of the spend there. Yeah, everything comes with AI at this point. Even the 25-year-old system, they'll try to make it fit in there in the estimate. So, but common misconceptions I think I see is that thinking just putting a dashboard in place or just putting cost notifications in place is going to have a meaningful action, and result in either reduced costs or just eking out improved efficiencies. So you can send notifications from your cloud system that you're burning 30% more than usual, compared to your average spend. But if you don't have an engineer or a technician who can actually address that or identify and say, this is actually because we're seeing a surge, say at an agency like FEMA during a natural disaster, it makes complete sense to see an increase in cloud utilization and hosted spend costs. But at other times, simply inefficient deployments, for example, need to be identified. And certainly those metrics tell you something is going on with your cloud spend or your additional provisioned instances that are eating up lots of licenses. But it's not just putting the notifications, putting these systems in place that give you better visibility won't fix everything. It comes down to culture. Can you instill a culture within your engineering teams that says we will on a routine basis, review our utilization in that cloud environment, if it's a cloud server. So, are we needing instances that are this size, or are we using 10% capacity? Or, when looking at licensing, saying, we've acquired 500 licenses, but we only need, 200 because we haven't deployed or the deployment didn't go in that experimental model the way we expected. So I think there's a certainly a technical component that allowing us to surface the information and pricing and cost data and the drivers that exist, but being able to get people to take action is very important. And so I think you've got to have both in order to eke the benefits of FinOps.
So Ron, I want to stay with you because I got a question from the chat. Based on your experience, are you seeing? You mentioned AI being part of as an add-on, and is it not a part of the larger solution, or are companies putting this as an additional cost and as a separate line item in the billing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak to any specific procurements, of course, but I think it's across the board. And it really depends on the vendor, whether they, consider it part of the larger solution or as a line item add-on. And sometimes we see a new component that has AI functionality or features. So I don't think there's any rule to that, but it really depends, I think, on the product and the service offering.
Got it.
I'm not afraid to answer that question. I think it's being added as an add-on in most cases, because I think in most cases the AI components, the AI SKUs that are being added are consumption based, and so even when you see a seat license, good news, your Microsoft 365 license now includes Copilot. Bad news, it's also $30 a month more per seat. Also bad news, if you exceed the limits of the Copilot thing, then it's additional cost that we didn't even tell you about, and that you can't negotiate. There are myriad of examples of this, and I'm not picking on Microsoft. It's just this is a pervasive thing, and I think organizations have said, I want to get this data. I want to be able to buy things by the drink. I want to buy consumption-based services, not be locked into a fixed price over a long period of time. But the cost of doing that is you have to then manage that. That's something that you have to manage. And that's where the kind of real-time action that a FinOps team does is really, really important.
Thanks, Rob. And Megan, coming to you, I want to understand what you're seeing as it relates to the gaps today. And so, what I'm trying to understand is where do you see the biggest gaps today between leadership's intent around being more efficient and what actually happens in the day-to-day IT decision making? What are your thoughts on that?
So, I think what I mentioned earlier around the misconception of cloud being expensive, when it gets down to it, when a FinOps practice gets put in place, and I've seen this at several agencies where we've been implementing FinOps, is they get to the inform phase, right? They can do it through their CSPs. There might be some dashboards. Maybe they're pulling it in through some other sort of tools that are out there around FinOps, but then they hit a screeching halt. And so it kind of goes back to what is FinOps, right? People see Fin and they say, oh, that's a financial thing. Like that's got to be the finance people. It's not for me to touch. If it has a dollar sign in front of it, I'm afraid of it, and they run the other direction. And so essentially what happens is it's like the Spider-Man pointing at the Spider-Man. No, you do this and you do this, right? But FinOps is essentially what it is. It's FinOps and operations. So much like DevSecOps, right? It's all of those things together. So there has to be, your cloud, component to this, right? Your cloud engineers, your application owners, your program owners. They're the only ones who are going to know like whether they should make a right sizing adjustment or if that doesn't make sense, right? I might see as a finance person that there is a huge savings to be explored by right sizing, a storage or compute component. However, if I talk to the program, there might be like, it's there on purpose for various reasons, right? So it really is a team sport. And I think that's where things become disconnected. So there really does have to be a good understanding of who's accountable for what, who's responsible for what, having clear communication and continuing that clear communication, right? The FinOps team can come to you and say, hey, here's what I'm seeing. What can we do about it? And then the cloud engineer can be like, yeah, we can take these 3 actions, but those other 4 are a do not touch. Let's ignore those. Let's, put them on silent, but let's create some anomaly detections on some of these other things, do some right sizing. So it really does come down to like really understanding who's on first, what's on second.
Thanks. I got an interesting question in the chat that I want to tee up to Ron over GSA. And so the government is going through this AI for $1. And so we're adopting AI for $1. And so these AI tools, will cost you $1 for a year. What is that going to look like from a FinOps perspective when the full price of that, the next budget year? What's that look like, Ron?
Congressional budgeting is a little outside of my scope of expertise. But what I will say is that when we bring in these new technologies at a very low cost, it gives us the opportunity to evaluate whether the technologies are useful. Can practitioners, preferably, non-technologists, in GSA, people in our public building service, at FEMA, who are actually delivering the, emergency and disaster relief, and other agencies. What value are they getting out of these technologies? And I think if an agency finds significant value, and vendors are stepping up to the plate to deliver services that are highly useful, I think that of course budget priorities can be shifted in those directions.
I want to switch topics. I want to talk a little bit about visibility and transparency and the trust in the IT spending. Agencies often struggle to explain why IT costs are increasing, not just why they are increasing. I remember when when I was on the federal side, I would always tell my director, the IT cost is going up because the agency is growing, and so it's like having more kids. The grocery bill does go up if you got more kids, or you're going to starve them to death, one way or another. But Megan, no, Rob, over to you. And how has federal engagement evolved, and where do the challenges still persist?
I'm just thanking my lucky stars. I wasn't one of Melvin's children now. I think that this is I mean, this is a hard problem to solve. In a couple of years ago, I would have said the primary issue here was just basic visibility, right? It's what's happening at a granular level. I think that that's been addressed by a lot of places where you know, in the old days, you used to like say, what am I spending on the cloud? And that your reseller might say, well, I don't have the contractual responsibility to give you your cloud build data. I think that is largely that's hopefully largely taken care of. We're including that in procurements. We're making sure that we have access to the right data. I think the cloud providers and technology providers out there are doing a better job at making or giving, you know, resellers and that they work with the ability to give you just your data, even if they are buying in aggregate. But then I think that there's a lot of you know, categorizing those costs and getting visibility to those costs in a consistent way is important as well. I think something that I see a lot of other agencies and a lot of other governments doing really well is adopting Focus, which is the FinOps open cost and usage spec that is a separate open source, sort of a sister project to the FinOps Foundation, but that tries to standardize the billing data and the billing language. It really standardized, like its best use is as a terminology normalizer, so that when I talk about effective cost, you understand and I understand what's included in there. Are all the discounts included in there? Yes. Is the, you know, the amortized portion of prepays in there? Yes. It's like a way to make that communication that Megan was talking about between finance and technology teams more easier because everybody understands the words that we're using. So I think kind of getting that basic, I'm going to still harp on that basic level of understanding, so that we've got common granularity, we've got normalized terms that we can use, and we can all talk about the same thing. Once we have that visibility, then we can have the conversations about what is this going to cost us next year, or what value are we getting out of this stuff.
So Ron, staying on the topic of transparency, what does meaningful cost transparency actually look like? I mean, in the federal context. And so how much detail is just too much? I mean, when I get to information overload?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask anyone in the federal government who's had to deal with data calls, especially budget data calls associated with IT services, you know, it's yet another layer of tasking, and you know, of course, we have FATARA reporting, and you know, the IT dashboard that exists that's being reported out on for major IT expenditures. I mean, certainly we know that the overhead exists for providing the level of transparency that we need in order to manage the IT budgets the size of the federal government. But I think that, you know, one thing that we're seeing now is a willingness to share pricing data across agencies, especially with the work with OCAS at GSA and the OneGov initiatives that have been the contracts that have been established. And so, you know, being able to identify where we can share pricing is so important, because you know, previously I think many folks putting together IGCs, for example, were, you know, asking their vendor, how much does this cost? Or they would maybe go to 2 or 3 vendors and ask that, and you know, there may or may not be an interest from those vendors to provide the best pricing. But if we can go to our peers in the federal space and have a look at the actual pricing that they're paying, you know, with those discounts, you know, with the volume pricing, we can get a better understanding of what would be fair, maybe for a small agency versus a larger agency who has a similar technology need.
Yeah, I want to let me stay on that point for a second, because one of the challenges I know that we had was this issue of shared costs. And so, Rob, looking back across the landscape, you know, what have you seen work or fail when agencies attempt to kind of move from this, you know, black box IT to, you know, opening the kimono up and saying, you know, these costs are shared, and now we've got, you know, what we consider to be actionable insights into determining, you know, what everybody's consumption kind of looks like. How's that been going so far?
I guess I can't speak directly to how it's going inside the government. I can speak to how that's going in other larger organizations. I think in some of the other governments around the world, UK government, Canadian government, some parts of the European Commission, although you can't ever speak to the European Commission as a whole, are sort of aggregating a lot of their cloud purchasing and other software purchasing through single vehicles. That gives you, sort of in FinOps world, whenever you can aggregate anything to a higher degree, you of course get better visibility across the entire state. You get to do some of the things Ron was just talking about, compare, like to like, and be able to understand how you're getting things. You also get the ability to negotiate deeper discounts, because cloud doesn't discount like percent off GSA. When I was at the government, we would often have people come in and say, I have 100% discount authority on software off the GSA schedule price. And it's like, if you're that flexible, then I don't know how much this should really be costing. Cloud doesn't scale all the way down to zero like that. And so we've got to be able to see sort of what's in place. And when we can see, when we get a broader view of things, that's better. For a single agency, that's not always compatible with the FAR. So for a single agency who's buying cloud, I think using a shared service model internally does allow you to at least aggregate within your agency or within parts of your agency, so that you can get kind of that broader visibility. And then treating that like a platform team, cloud platform teams, just like Kubernetes platform teams or container platform teams are a growing percentage of companies are using that kind of a model, where you've got a small team that's responsible for the governance, the guardrails, the security, the infrastructure around that technology category, and then can charge that back and transparently. And when you've got good information, you can really talk openly about that. That's something that you can get a lot of value out of. But it requires sort of leadership to say it's okay for us to talk about these things, because information sharing is always hard.
All right. So when we talk about cloud cost optimization and modernization outcomes, agencies have, a lot of them, they've migrated to the cloud, but they struggle to realize the expected cost and performance benefits. I've heard it said that, I should have stayed in the data center. It was cheaper. Data center was cheaper. And so, Megan, I want to hear from you about what do cloud modernization efforts, most commonly fall short from a FinOps perspective?
Sure thing. Yeah, it took me a while to be able to say repatriation without tripping over it. So many times I hear that a lot in the government now. But where I've seen it, and where I think it's really coming out is what I kind of inferred before, is that we get to the inform phase, we never quite can, like, maybe we dabble in the optimized phase, but we never quite get there. So, a lot of agencies hear things like, oh, I'm going to save 20 to 30% in savings or cost avoidance. And then they're like, where is it? Right. And so I think there's a number of reasons behind that. I think some of it's just failure to capture the information, right? There's probably a lot going on that's just not being captured as a KPI, right? There's a lot of tools out there that can help you capture it, but if you're not like actively doing this, then there's a lot of savings that are happening that you're just not reporting on. And with cloud costs continually increasing, right? Programs are increasing, like you had mentioned, Melvin, like your agency costs are increasing. If they see that and they don't see the savings, like it's just all hidden to them. It's a black box. So you really do have to be capturing those things. And then also, sometimes it's inaction. So one of the things that I had mentioned before around getting everyone involved, people might just say, I'm not taking that action, or it's just not coming across, or nobody's telling them to do it. I always say, it's if there's really no one from an executive level telling somebody to do something, it's like when I was 5 and my mom told me to clean the room. If the door is closed, she doesn't know it's there, right? So like nobody knows it's happening. So if nobody's really watching me and asking me about this and a firm practice is in place, I think a lot of that happens too. So, how do we get past that? Obviously, people really need to establish that FinOps practice, have those conversations. They aren't going to be easy, right? Doesn't just rely on finance, but you do need a financial person. You do need your cloud team. So get in a room together and talk. I know it's really hard sometimes, but even if it's virtually. So I think we see a lot of it in that perspective, and really understanding what those outcomes were that you were trying to achieve in the first place. So I'm not saying that like something shouldn't move back off the cloud. That might be the right answer. But being able to forecast those things, I think that's where people really like, fall short, is what is the true total cost of ownership? So of course I'm going to slide into TBM a little bit here. So FinOps and TBM play together really, really well. And I think having that, good view of most people have a hybrid landscape. Being able to know when they should move back or when they should modernize or when they should move to the cloud is going to be instrumental in that and understanding actual cost savings. Because yeah, just pulling everything back is a gut reaction and not an actual like data-driven decision.
So I want to stay there for a second. So, I mean, you made a good point, talking about the trade-offs. How should agencies think about those trade-offs? What are some of the best practices for evaluating those trade-offs around cost optimization, resilience, security, performance, rather than just thinking about it as an isolated event? How do they take a holistic approach to that?
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of tools out there, and we're not going to go down the tool rabbit hole, but it's more than just FinOps, right? It's also application performance. So like you do need to look at things holistically. So like if I was the IRS, for example, and I have a mobile tax application, I'm not going to right size something because I see nothing happening in December and just going down to like the bare minimum because April hits and my world's going to end, right? So we really do need to look at things holistically. But also the one thing I see too is sometimes people aren't taking advantage of the flexibility of the cloud. So sometimes we see that where it's like, hey, we're so used to people saying, let's have it be a firm fixed price. So they're jumping into like savings plans, reserved instances, and then they use nothing of it, right? So a lot of it's monitoring that sort of stuff. Continue to take advantage of it, but understand where you could move some workloads. But even just kind of the look back, right? Like the idea of cloud is that you can flip a switch on and flip a switch off, right? So sometimes people are so used to the way we used to do things, like we need, at least, 6 month look back, maybe even a year. Well, not in cloud because light switch, right? So best practices are around 30 and 60 days. So some people get hung up on that and they're like, we can't do anything because we don't have 6 months of data. I guarantee nobody wants to look through 6 months of a CUR file unless you have a lot of time. So, that's why a lot of these practices really need to come into play. And we really do need to like shift our mind frame as to like how we used to do things to the fact that the pace of things are moving faster. We need to evolve with that, right? And that's where the AI conversation becomes important too. It's like, okay, we could use AI to help with right sizing and forecasting and all this stuff that we haven't done well in the past. And I think those are really great things to do with it. But again, we have to flip our mind frame on it, right? We need to look at this a little bit differently. So again, that's really why it comes back to FinOps, because it's not just about the large dollar sign, it's about unit economics. Like Rob had mentioned earlier, if we're growing and I can prove to you that we're paying $1.50 as opposed to $2, that says a lot, right? And then if we really do need to bring that back, let's start looking at performance, scalability, reliability, and making sure that we're not hurting anything from the mission and we're still able to achieve everything we do. But it's sort of like if you've ever done budgeting, if you look at it from the keep the lights on budget, it's looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. So if I'm having more children, my grocery bill should go up. Exactly. So, we cannot have a conversation and not talk about AI. And so FinOps in the age of AI and data-driven intensive workloads, AI and the advanced analytics introduce new cost dynamics that traditional IT budgeting models, they weren't really designed to handle that. And so, Rob, I'm asking you, what role should FinOps play in governing AI pilots to ensure experimentation doesn't lead to uncontrolled cost?
Yeah, I think fortunately, the answer is do all the things that you're currently doing, probably for your cloud cost, right? All the things that Megan was just talking about, the consistency of the review, the visibility of the data, the communication that's going on across or across the different silos or the different disciplines within your organization. That's all so critical in AI, or whenever you hit up against a new thing. If you think back to like sort of cloud adoption, when it was suddenly cloud first and everybody's moving to cloud, what did agencies do, right? There was a tiger team of, somebody from IT security, somebody from procurement, somebody from finance, somebody from a bunch of people from technology. And they were meeting together and talking about how are we going to do this? How are we going to manage this transition? Because it was a big change. There were not as many paved paths as we would like there to be. We had to involve groups like enterprise architecture, all the stuff, all the challenges that Megan was just talking about. Like we need to think about how we architect our systems, not so that we have a really comfortable straight line spend curve, but so that we have kind of a hockey stick spend curve. I don't want to launch those new test or production environments until I'm done developing, because spending money to run those things when they're not running any software all year doesn't make any sense. So we've got to be able to think about that stuff. And what AI does is it just makes everything faster. It's faster and it's more granular. And it's more deep, and we're now tracking to more abstracted things. So instead of paying for hours that this computer is running, whether I'm using it or not, by the way, I'm paying for tokens that I'm using in there, and I don't always have as good a visibility into tokens. I don't have as good a visibility into the other features and things that I have to pay for around tokens when I use them for compression or for prompt routing, or for doing all the things that I would do to control my AI costs. So I need to think about those things in a new way. And the thing I would tell an agency is, get your architects on board as early as possible to sort of form those standard ways that you would like to use AI. Focus in on the AI things that are most important to your mission, not all the AI things that are going on, because AI has this tricky trait where it pops up in everything. Like when you start saying, I'm doing FinOps on my AI cost, somebody starts saying, well, how are you using AI to do your FinOps? Right? And it does that. It reverses on you, and you start using it for things. You have to be really skeptical about, like, what are the things that are actually driving mission value, that are allowing us to achieve our mission that we want to continue to spend on beyond this dollar a year, as Ron was saying earlier. So it is a challenging thing to get together, but you just need to get your team together, keep up the communication, keep up the collaboration, and make sure that you're doing that at a faster rate, unfortunately.
So we're on the topic of data, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. We looking at FinOps intersecting with our data strategy, and so particularly around storage, compute, just the whole life cycle of data management. Where do you see the intersection with FinOps?
Yeah, so I'm kind of sad Ron brought up data calls before I did, because I had a fun little marks like bring up data calls, because everyone loves talking about that. And I know that it's a big thing that's happening right now. People are like getting data calls right now. How much are you spending on AI? And I'm pretty sure a lot of people have a bunch of question marks. They get out an Excel sheet and they start throwing numbers on it. It's like throwing spaghetti at a wall, right? I have no idea how much I'm spending on AI. Like Ron and Rob alluded to, it's probably buried in some of these things. Some of it just comes back to very simplistic basic standards here, right? If you are using AI and it's like it's not built into something else, like tag it by program. Simple little things like that are going to save you a lot in the future. The last thing you want to do is like get a data call that has a 48-hour turnaround time and it asks you about AI costs broken down by program, and you don't have it. Right. So if you really start doing these things early within your data strat, like a basic tagging data strategy, you're going to get a lot more information out of it. And don't just start with program, right? Think about the life cycle stage. Is this a pilot? Is this in production, right? Because guess what? Those are probably going to be in your data call in the future. There are things that you can do too, right, to automate this, right? Like, so even beyond AI, let's just talk about simple automation strategies. If we're looking at the data strategy as a whole, FinOps can really help in this area. Obviously continually looking at right sizing things, anomaly detection. I can't stress enough about anomaly detection, and especially if you're doing a pilot, like please, please, please turn off the light switch on the weekends. You do not need that dev environment up and running. Like these are small, simple things that are not going to affect production, and that you can do. It doesn't have to be AI related, right? But then also you want to understand your cost drivers. So understanding your program and then the cost drivers that align to AI, because it's just one thing to say, what am I spending on AI? But everybody should hopefully knows there are a lot of different things that AI consumes. Like, is it just more like a chat bot? Is it actually, generative AI? Like, what are you spending it on? So, like, again, comes back to tagging, really understanding why you're doing it. Because I'm sorry, all of those little Facebook memes of doing your little caricature probably isn't the best use for agency time. It's fun to make logos, but like, what are we using it for and how does it tie back to the mission? That's really where you're going to get the most value. So those things all should be tied back to your data strategy.
So Megan, what I heard you say is if I'm going away for the weekend, don't leave all the lights on in the house. I got it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think most of us grew up when money doesn't grow on trees.
Check. So Ron, I'm coming to you, and I want to talk a little bit about, our operating models, cultural change, governance. FinOps success often hinges upon people, processes, and then tools. So what governance models have you seen succeed in aligning finance, IT, acquisition, and mission stakeholders that, kind of bring everybody together holistically?
Gosh, I mean, I know it's an old adage at this point, but the breaking down those silos between the finance group, the IT teams, and making sure that folks can access the data that reflects the cost of the services that they're deploying. It is too complex. We live in too complex of a world, and certainly an IT space, to be able to look at a program office and say, oh, they have, $16 million that they spent on IT products last year. That's fine because the office adjacent to them spent 75 million for IT services. That has no meaning. What really needs to happen, and has been effective, is having smaller teams that really understand the problem space that they're working in at the program level. And so that often is not hundreds of people that are working on the program, but a handful of folks who understand the cost drivers of, say, an application deployment that's in support of the business office or the program office that has this service offering to the public. And so being able to get the right people in the room who understand how an application is architected, how it's developed, and why certain cost drivers are pushing expenses above what we expect is very important. And so the visibility and openness to share the utilization of infrastructure. I mean, I've been in meetings where we literally opened up CloudWatch and said, we're seeing 5% utilization across these systems. Like, what gives, right? And like Megan was saying, like, shut those off on the weekend, or scale that down in the off season. I mean, certainly, using IRS as an example, they wouldn't shut down their refund information website, year round, but they would, scale it back during the off season, because they simply just don't have as many people, processing transactions. So I think, looking at models and approaches and strategies that are needed, shared metrics, so we all have a common understanding of what is going on, and regular evaluation. You can't look at how much you're spending on cloud when you get the cloud invoice for the entire agency's utilization. That doesn't mean anything, because it's all bundled. It's all your different ideally all your different program offices buying these cloud products. That might work for like a SaaS offering, like an Office 365, where you can look at licensing, but that really doesn't work for the complex applications that exist in the federal space. And then, thinking about the technology experience that your core and contract staff has. These are people with finance experience, and let me be clear, contracting officers and our cores are so important to the work we do, but they are often not experts in, say, cloud services. What's if you say what's a Kubernetes versus a Lambda, they're going to look at you and say, I don't know, is that a car? And so, being able to work with them and really do regular evaluation of your IT spend earlier, before it hits the invoice, before you get to the renewal period, or you're considering exercising a new option year.
All right, we got about maybe 15 minutes left, and I want to give each one of you an opportunity to be kind of forward thinking. And so measuring value beyond cost reduction and looking ahead. FinOps is often framed as a cost cutting discipline, but the real value is much broader. And so, Megan, I started with you. I'm going to start with you again as we start to bring this to a close. How should agencies measure and communicate FinOps success beyond just dollars saved?
So I'm going to start with a vision statement. I'm going to get you all inspired. So imagine a world where you walk in to a meeting with like your CIO, your CFO. It's got all of your CXOs. They're all in the room together. Maybe it's got your agency head in there. And you have a cool little dashboard up there and it's showing all this stuff that's happening. It's got all these KPIs and they're all tied back to your mission objectives. The one thing that we always see when we walk into these rooms right now today is, why is IT so expensive? But imagine a world where they see the value as opposed to a dollar figure. And it's not how much did we save and how much more can we cut, but the question is how much more can we accomplish? So the idea here is really kind of going back to those, KPIs and really ensuring that a lot of your FinOps initiatives, it's not only just about managing the cloud, it's about tying those things back to your core mission, right? People don't wake up and say, oh, how many storage, like EC2s did I deploy and how many did I right size and how many K8s am I managing and can I actually see into, people don't really care. But if they can tie it back to a mission and say like, hey, we had this program, we modernized it, we added these different services. Of course, the cost of cloud is going to go up, but look at the unit economics, how much we saved, how much we right sized, all of these different KPIs, and they all tie back to this particular mission objective. That's what people really want to see. We focus too much on IT as a program, which is like kind of like the 1990s way of managing IT, right? We should be really looking at it. IT, you can't do IT without business today, right? Like I remember one long time ago, I was back at Social Security and the lights went out. And we were like, what do? We couldn't work. Like, we had no laptop. We didn't even have laptops. So we were talking towers. Anyways, but we didn't know what to do. We had no idea what to do with ourselves. But yet we're still looking at IT as this separate entity instead of it being built into our core operations. So I think, with FinOps, having all of that tied back, having the proper tagging strategy, being able to have those KPIs to say, hey, not only did we save this, but like, here's, number, cost per user, cost per person coming into, like, we're going to use IRS again, how much does it cost me to do a tax refund, right? How much does that tie back to? I think that's really where the focus should be moving forward. And the cost savings should happen by accident, I would say. Of course, it's not by accident, it's actually done by proper practice. So it really is those mission enabled KPIs. Scorecards are going to be huge, right? We should definitely be looking at things like that. Executive dashboards, having those value driven metrics, understanding what those outcomes are. Because again, kind of going back to the AI thing, questioning why we're doing it. So being like a 4-year-old, asking yourself why multiple times until you get to the point of like, okay, this is what we want to do and this is why we want to do it, right? Think about like, the HR hiring process. Since you're from OPM, you love this one, right? The government HR hiring process is so hard, right? What if we used AI to kind of go through and like kind of give us those beginning portions to say, hey, I am picking up on some of these keywords, or here's a summary of the 20-page resume that was sent to me. Got to go to the 2 pages, but like things like that, just very simplistic things like that are going to be such a time saver for everyone. Like I'm not just talking IT, this is anybody across the government. So really being intentional and thinking about those things, linking them back together is going to be instrumental in the coming years.
Ron, same question.
Ron.
Ron.
Oh, Ron. Okay. I'll go back to Megan's earlier comment, which is, understanding the move to cloud. Agencies said and questioned, are we spending more in cloud? Why is cloud? Why was it cheaper in the data center? And it comes back to, we're now doing more in cloud than we were doing in the data center historically. And so I think that we're going to continue to see new adoption of technologies, and we have to keep applying strategies to and really not just strategies, we actually have to take on the behaviors that allow us to reduce cost, or at minimum be aware that what is the value that these costs are delivering. Certainly there's plenty of circumstances where we spend more on a service, on a technology, because it's providing better security or stability, or it's providing a new function that provides a better service to the public. And so, but really, I think the behaviors that we like to see for IT management into the future is going to be having the holistic view of the cost, understanding the underlying drivers, and then investing in the technologies that are delivering success and being performant to the program areas.
Rob Martin, as the senior statesman for FinOps, I'm going to give you the final word and final thought, and I did not call you old.
Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna have probably the most boring response, because I completely agree with what Megan and Ron just said. There's an old statement in FinOps that FinOps isn't about saving money, it's about making money. Right. The idea behind this is, if we are spending the money, and I'll change that to meeting our mission, right? The point of all of the things that we're doing is to make sure that we meet the mission that we're required to meet. It's been, I was at a large justice related agency back in the early 2000s when it seemed to become sort of passe to manage the organization like a business. It is a difficult thing, and all of you who are doing this in the federal space are heroes for trying to manage our tax money efficiently, and to get to the outcomes that we are trying to get to. But we need to be able to tie the spending that we're doing to those outcomes. I think that a lot of the things we've talked about today, the maturing of cloud use, the broader look at what you're doing across not just cloud, but across your data centers and across your SaaS spending, across your license spending, across your labor, all the things that we're looking at, and then the actions that we can take when we have that visibility are going to be the key things to do it. The most successful FinOps teams in the world are the ones who are able to drive that kind of cultural action, that collaboration, the integration of those teams across silos, the integration of teams from top to bottom, right? Megan talked a little bit about the unit economics of, the way that executives talk about things is in terms of risk and dollars. And if I have to sort of boil down, when I talk to my agency head, they probably don't want to hear how many servers we have in the data center versus how many servers we have in the cloud. They want to hear about the efficiency of the programs that we're running. Because when we can get that kind of information to the highest level we can, wherever you're starting, that may be just at your program level, or that may be at your agency level, or it may be at cross agencies. Wherever you are, if you're able, the higher you're able to drive that information, the better flexibility you're going to build into the system to allow you to make those trade-offs, right? Because delivering IT value is a series of trade-offs to get, to minimize to manage your risk along the way, to manage your spending along the way, and ultimately to get to the outcome that you're trying to do. So I'll just sort of leave it there. That's, if I had if I was talking to an agency head, I would say, ask your demand from your FinOps teams the information that you need to give the rest of your organization the flexibility that you can give them, so that they can move forward, they can make trade-offs, they can do the right thing to try to achieve the goals. It's not just about spending all the money. It's about getting to our mission, and the more flexibility. I loved what Megan said, and in the vision statement. I have to go look at her Etsy page now. about like, I want to have that conversation where somebody says like, could I spend more on this to get an even better outcome? Or what else can I do with this extra money that we have in this appropriation that's still within the remit of the mission that we're trying to achieve, but that gives us an additional capability that we didn't even think that we'd have the ability to deliver. And that's where I think, the best people in government are thinking. And I hope that all continues.
All right. So with that, I want to ask the audience to give these people a round of applause. Thank you, Megan, Rob, and Ron, for your insightful comments and for being fully transparent with us. And to the feds that are on the phone or on the call, we do want to thank you publicly, all of us, for your service. We know how hard it is for you to do what you do with the budgets and the constraints that you have, and so we want to thank you for that. And if there's anything that we can do from the foundation's perspective to help you with this framework and help you all, optimize the work that you're doing, please don't hesitate to reach out. My name's Melvin Brown. I've said it before. I'll say it again. You were born to be great. Now go be great. Varsha, back to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Dan, you want to close or you want me to close?
Either way, just this last slide, say that thank everyone for the panel and Melvin for the wonderful session today, and we look forward to seeing you in March for our next next meeting.
Yeah, and we'll share some updates on our ITMM ACT-IAC webpage, so please follow us, and more good sessions are coming this year, so we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.